dia, Brazil. Good afternoon in Europe. We're very happy to have you here in our webinar today. A couple of simple tips to have a successful webinar. Please mute your microphone if you're not speaking. This webinar has simultaneous interpretation into Brazilian Portuguese, so please select your language using the interpretation menu. And we encourage participants to send questions using the Q&A function, if possible, specifying which speaker you'd like to hear from, and we'll get to the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. With that being said, I would like to introduce the authorities who will be opening this webinar from the IEA side and from the side of the Ministry of Mines and Energy of Brazil. First, we will hear from Bruno Eustáquio. Bruno is the Deputy Executive Secretary at the Ministry of Mines and Energy. We will then hear from Mr. Dave Turk. Dave is the Acting Deputy Executive Director at the International Energy Agency. So I would like to pass the floor first to Mr. Bruno Eustáquio. Thank you.
Okay, Mariano, thank you. Thank you for very qualified words about me. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you for the organization of this event, especially the IEA and the support of Prosperity Fund. Yeah. I'm grateful for the invitation to be here. Also, I'd like to extend my greetings to my colleagues from Brazil, IEA, and we have here colleagues from other countries like Spain, Netherlands, UK. So thank you. I believe it will providing us very, very qualified inputs in order to evaluate the reform of new gas market in Brazil. Obviously, for us, it's a pleasure being part of this discussion because we are in the way of this policy in Brazil, and we have been using a very qualified way the public and the discussion developed along with this meeting. So, just a few words about natural gas and opportunity. Despite the COVID-19, natural gas has been gaining traction as a key option to support the energy shift in favor of cleaner and greener energy sources. Although the gas demand is expected a drop of 4% in 2020, caused by COVID, especially lockdown combined with other weather aspects in Europe. So we expect a to rebound economy in the next 2 years. This is a citation about a recent report of IEA. In fact, this will push the demand to another level. The resilience of the sector has been checked during this time. Yeah, we have been checking in other policies at the Ministry of Mines and Energy. And also, it will provide an opportunity to review some policies and regulations that strengthen the economy to achieve both energy transition and economy recovery. In fact, this is a time that implies bolstering efforts to make the environment favorable to ensure such rebounds. Just a few words about the benchmarking, especially the USA and Europe. So while the regulatory experience law like those applying in the USA and Europe have become a benchmark for entire world, countries should implement the best practice in order to achieve a major gas market. This is a core of our new gas market in Brazil. We have been a lot of discussion with IEA members in order to support this kind of transition that will have go ahead. In fact, these markets have been greatly benefit, especially at this pandemic time, from factors such as open access to infrastructure and system operation, unbundling market and transport functions, removing barriers, tax barriers in our case, improve the subnational regulatory threshold, and becoming market friendly. In the Brazilian case, the resolution law enacted by our National Policy Energy Council, CNPE in Portuguese, ensure favorable environment, giving space for new players by vertically unbundling of Petrobras. So in terms of context, brief words about the gas market in Brazil. Yeah, we have play a crucial role in achieving the national aspiration of increasing the pre-salt share gas. Since the decision made by our CNPE Council, some outcomes are a completion, like increasing of the number of gas traders authorization by 48%. We have 3 new gas-fired power plants hired on A-6. This is an energy auction in 2019 with goodwill about 60%. Increasing transparency on prices to consumers, and also allowing the bankers to the gas underground storage and liquefied and gas gasification. In fact, we are in the current process of unbundling Petrobras, regarding Petrobras, with remaining sales of equity in the transporting system. I'm talking about 10% in TAG, for example, 10% in NTS, and also the total in Petrobras sale of equity in the distribution companies that will allow us to implement in accordance with the subnational regulators best regulatory practices. In fact, our decision will support the expansion of the gas industry by providing competitiveness, price transparency, as I mentioned before, flexibility in procurement and payment security, confirmed by the recent results. Ensuring price benchmarks will drive a race across the value chain and stimulate investments in AP along the whole downstream infrastructure. Moreover, markets determine open access, best regulatory practices, and affordable pricing will also boost industrial growth and economic competitiveness. In fact, we have some key enablers to the new gas market in Brazil. Yeah. As I said, the gas industry stands as the cusp of exponential growth, driven by market-based mechanisms. It is important that we support it with a policy approved in our House of Representatives, and also to get a regulatory framework up to date in the national and subnational level to let the markets thrive. Friends, the House of Representatives recently approved the bill number 6407 2013, in line with the new gas market policy enacted by our National Council. This will pave a growth path for the gas markets, eliminate the barriers that I mentioned before, open the access to the essential facilities, changing, for example, the regime model of transmission system and natural gas underground storage, and creating better conditions to attract investments. It is important to reinforce that this approval needs to be addressed in order to bring a real transformation. And also the ex-post analysis of this bill, it will very, very important to us, because we know that we are in the transition process. In fact, as a result, the coupling of markets of monopolies while ensuring greater competition, better utilization of pipe infrastructure, improvement on the regulatory governance, regulation by incentives, and low costs for end customers. This is the right time to integrate both domestic and LNG markets, since prices have converged for both. To finish my speech to this exceptional event, we have a great way forward. On the supply side, we expect more than double an increase of 6.6% per year. This is a date for our research company in the last 10-year plan that is in progress at this moment. On the demand side, we estimated it to double from 30 million meters cubes, more than 29% in comparison with 2019. Moreover, we expected investments about 7.7 billion US dollar in the next decade, with 30,000 job opportunities in the gas natural sector. In fact, embracing the current policy and the regulatory agenda, Brazil can indeed accelerate its path towards a building market-based gas economy. Our best practice in our segments in our review discussion with international agencies have become a great opportunity to make a new gas market robust and sufficient at this stage. In fact, well-functioning market requires the approval of bill that I mentioned before. It will create legal stability, good conditions to the natural gas monetization, opening the access in essential facilities, reducing the transactional costs. As an example, I presented before, changing the authorization regime and the stock and the transport systems. In fact, it will enable more 2,000 kilometers. Moreover, Brazil have a suitable regulatory framework allowing entry-exit barriers to transactions, increasing transparency, and separating monopolies and commercial activities, creating opportunities to generate revenues to the states in general, about 363 million per year. Furthermore, the current electric sector modernization policy will be benefited by the new gas market policy and vice versa. It will happen by the both aspects, competitiveness and safety at the same time. There is a clear match in both policies. My colleagues, all that is required is to carry on actions that will support building a vibrant and competitive gas market. A vibrant market will ensure the exponential growth of the industry by powering consumer demand and propagation of supply. So this is my few words, Mariano, my colleagues from IEA, my colleagues from Ministry of Mines and Energy, and our other federal entities about the policy, the new gas market reform in Brazil. We expect to get a lot of good outcomes of this discussion today in order to improve our understanding and our to identify the challenges that we have go ahead. Mariano, thanks again from the Minister of Mines and Energy side, and we hope we have a good discussion in this meeting nowadays. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Bruno, for the terrific scene setter remarks, and thank you even more for the terrific partnership that we have between the IEA and Brazil. To say Brazil is a valuable member of our IEA family is very much understating the importance that we certainly put on the relationship, and we hope that the relationship grows in even more areas and deeper. We'd like to see more Brazil in the IEA and more IEA in Brazil as well. So whatever we can do to help the cause, we're here and able to help. It's also certainly true we follow with great interest the developments in Brazil, and not just football. I see what might be a football jersey behind you, but maybe that's assuming too much. But also with some of the terrific other efforts that you all are working on, the Renova biofuels program, the impressive rise of distributed PV recently, in particular, the current reform processes in gas and power sectors, the gas sector that we're talking about here today as well. So we pay very much a close attention in the IEA, not only in the Secretariat, but our member governments as well. In fact, I think it's true to say Brazil has been an example of impressive long-term planning that a lot of countries would like to have. I'm thinking of important energy policy areas like biofuels and hydropower in particular, but there's other examples of that as well. So congratulations, Bruno, to your work and all of your colleagues as well. And thank you very much for the partnership. At the IA, we really
Thank you,
look forward. Oh, thanks, Bruno. What was it? A football jersey behind you? Well, while we wait for Bruno's answer, I'll.
Dave.
Go ahead.
Dave. Yeah, I came back. We have a small delay here. So yeah, for sure. It's not my team is not good at this moment. You know, I believe it's better to discuss New Gas Marketing Brazil. It's better to discuss about my team.
Well, I lived in Brazil as a kid for a few years outside of Niterói on the other side of the bay from Rio. And my dad was a big fan of the Fluminense football club, which did not always have the best seasons, especially compared to some more powerful rival clubs as well. So I can sympathize with you.
My team is Cruzeiro, Dave.
Okay, there you go.
From Belo Horizonte. Yeah, it's not good. But there is a good soccer that was presented in Spain, you know, for example, Ronaldo Fenômeno and so on. So there is but at this moment is not a good moment for Cruzeiro. So it is better to discuss New Gas Market.
Well, we'll get back there with the Brazilian World Cup national team and the other Brazilian stars around the world as well. One thing that we're seeing more and more in the IEA, and this is certainly true with Brazil, is we're very much happy at the IEA to kind of play a middle person role, in that we hope that there's a lot of international experience that's useful for Brazil, and that's part of the focus of today's conversation. But also, likewise, we're seeing a lot of interest in what Brazil is doing for a lot of other countries and companies around the world. So it really is a two-way street, and certainly for our analysts who work, Bruno, with you and your colleagues, we find the collaboration a very much a two-way learning experience, and we very much appreciate that. Let me turn to today's webinar in particular, and just to add to Bruno's excellent remarks, some scene setting. We think this is another milestone in our work with Brazil, specifically our multi-year work on natural gas market design, which started 2 years ago in 2018, which 2018 seems like about 4 lifetimes ago, given the COVID pandemic and how long this year has seen, and very much appreciate the support of the United Kingdom in particular that's supporting some of our efforts to make this possible. Throughout this collaboration, which has involved 30 gas experts from a number of IEA member countries, work to facilitate access to the international experiences. What have others learned in their own gas market reform? Trying to extract, refine, and tailor those learnings relevant for a Brazilian context in particular. This was the basis of the IEA white paper on this topic, which will be made publicly available very shortly. And this decades of international experience, we think and hope, can really inform policymaking implementation. And Brazil can draw lessons learned from others, lessons in a positive way and cautionary lessons as well. Lessons from the current discussions, the developments over recent years, including and especially of the role of natural gas and clean energy transitions that are going on around the world. And what we're seeing around the world, including in Europe, is that modern natural gas infrastructure can serve as a gateway, as a boost for other low carbon gases, including biomethane, hydrogen, both of which also hold great potential in the Brazilian context. So we're extremely pleased. In fact, nothing pleases us more at the IEA when we see that our work and the consultations are actually being implemented, are actually being useful for real world reform, the kind of which is going on in the natural gas sector in Brazil. Implementation is a top priority for us. It's one thing to do data, to do rigorous analysis, to put out recommendations. It's another thing, and the most important part of the equation, for those policies, those recommendations to actually get implemented in a real world context. So we're very, very pleased that we're seeing utility of what we've been working on. Let me just end with one last thought. Brazil certainly has an abundance of natural resources, no doubt. But I think even more important is the excellent human resources, the young, dynamic, diverse population. And if we want to be successful in any long-term reform process, whether it's in natural gas or clean energy transitions more broadly, we frankly need all hands on deck. We need Brazil helping to lead globally, and we need all Brasileiros helping to lead within Brazil as well. So on behalf of the whole IEA team, I'd like to congratulate and thank our international experts who put together this terrific analysis. Our Brazilian co-host, thank you again, Bruno, to you and your team for all the active engagement, the partnership, the contributions that have brought us to today's webinar. So I'll conclude there. Let's get on with the substance of the matter. I think I'm turning it, Mariano, back to you to go forward with the webinar. But thanks again for all the partnership.
Thank you very much, Dave, and thank you, Bruno, for these opening remarks. We will now hear from two gas experts at the IEA. First, we will hear from Jean-Baptiste Dubreuil. Jean-Baptiste is a senior gas expert who will make a keynote address on the global panorama for gas in 2020 and in the medium term. We will, after Jean-Baptiste, we will hear from Gergely Molnar. Gergely is a gas analyst at the IEA who will be presenting some of the insights from our collaboration with Brazil focused on the implementation of the Novo Mercado de Gás. Thank you. Jean-Baptiste, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariano. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be virtually with you all to share some introductory remarks on the global landscape for that recent evolution of global gas markets. Next, please. Thanks. So natural gas has been in the fast lane over the past years with an impressive 5% year-on-year growth in 2018. As you can see on this chart, it slowed down last year to lower than 2% growth only, with the main engines of gas demand growth slowing down, especially in emerging Asia. Of course, this year, we do anticipate that due to the exceptional situation of the COVID crisis, most of the fuel consumption, all the fuels will be impacted, and gas will be no exception. Next, please. One thing which is worth to remember is that, of course, if the COVID situation is the main driver behind the decline of gas demand this year, natural gas is specifically driven by temperature conditions. In fact, about 20% of global gas consumption comes from residential consumption across the world, which is heavily driven by space heating needs and therefore by temperature. And we have gone through this year one of the mildest winter ever recorded in the Northern Hemisphere throughout North America, Europe, Eurasia, and Northern Asia. So it explains, as you can see on this chart, that both in North America and Europe, we have started the year with consumption levels way below what we have seen in the previous years. Of course, at the end of this mild winter, the COVID pandemic unfolded, which led to several sorts of measures to limit its expansion, and which had an impact on overall economic activity and, of course, on energy consumption. Just would like to highlight on this chart the specific shapes of consumption in both Brazil and India, which are particularly impacted by the development of the COVID pandemic over the second quarter, after a very positive development in the first quarter. Next, please. On the supply side, the situation is quite similar, but with a bit of delay, as the production has been quite resilient over the first months of the year. The situation is a bit different if we look from one player to another. Looking at the upstream side, the story from the United States, which is the leading producer of natural gas, shows that domestic production has been quite resilient since the beginning of the year. You can see on all charts the red curve, which shows the monthly evolution of production. You see that apart from a dent in June, which was mainly owing to lower oil production, which had an impact on associated gas production. You see that American gas productions remain quite stable. This is a completely different story when we look at Russia. Russia as being the second largest gas producer in the world and the first exporter of natural gas. As you can see, Russia has been suffering from the double impact of lower domestic market consumption, also lower need from export markets, especially in Europe. And as we speak today, Russian gas production is roughly 9% below last year, whereas US production is still slightly positive compared to last year. In terms of global trade, see that global LNG trade is declining structurally since the beginning of the year, thanks to a very positive first trimester. Is still in positive territory, but the margin is getting very thin, and we will certainly not experience double-digit growth as the industry was used to in the past. Last but not least, the European gas imports have been collapsing, Europe being the largest import of natural gas in terms of volumes as a region. And you can see that at the end of H1, Europe was at its medium-term lowest levels in terms of imports. Next, please. So the combination of lower demand and delayed impact on the supply side and oversupply leads to a collapse in market prices that you can see on this chart. US Henry Hub's minus 20% since the beginning of over the first half of the year. Europeans TTF minus 55%, and Asian LNG spot index minus 65%. Since the end of H1, and throughout the summer, we have seen some recovery. Some of those indices almost close to their level at the beginning of the year. Recovery is on the way thanks to the combination of supply side adjustments and also some feedback on the demand side and progressive return. However, this return on demand is not sufficient to compensate for the losses that we have seen over the first half. Next, please. And what we do expect is that this year, 2020, will mark the largest shock on gas demand ever recorded, with about 120 BCM of decline, which is roughly 3 times the consumption of a country such as Brazil. It is going to be about 3% decline year on year. We do assume that most of that decline will be met by recovery next year and 2021, but it's not going to be a giant rebound as we have seen 10 years ago, just after the financial crisis 2008, when in 2009 there was a 2% decline, which was followed by a 6% increase in 2010. This time it's going to be more or less even. At the end of next year, we'll be back more or less at a global level to the 2019 levels. This owes mainly to the contribution of faster growing markets, especially in Asia, which will supplement the lower recovery from mature markets. After 21, in the coming years, is the same fast growing markets in Asia, which will drive further demand growth. So it looks like we're returning to the previous gas market narrative before the crisis, but it doesn't look like that we're going back to business as usual, because we do expect the current COVID crisis to have longer lasting impacts on gas demand markets. First, on the demand side, demand is going to be lower than expected for a longer time. We do anticipate that for the next 5 years, we will lose about 75 to 80 BCM of demand compared to our previous anticipation. This is roughly the year-on-year growth that was observed last year. So we lose the equivalent of 2019 global gas growth in the next 5 years due to the long-lasting impact of COVID. And on the supply side, next please, there's a lot of uncertainty also on the supply side. One of the main question mark in terms of supply is the evolution of global LNG market. The LNG market has been the main engine for global gas trade growth over the past years. It was used to double-digit growth rates. We do anticipate that growth is to be maintained in the future, but not at those levels. It is going to slow down, whereas on the same time, the supply capacity is likely to increase massively as a result of the investment decisions which were taken over the past 2 to 3 years, which will result in a loose LNG market for the next years. So on the positive side, it means this has a silver lining for emerging markets, especially for price-sensitive markets, which will take advantage of competitive market conditions to establish market-based gas economies. At the same time, the negative impact that this climate is likely to discourage future investment decisions, which will be needed beyond 2025 once the market rebalances to ensure further supply development and security of supply. Next, please. Next, please. Yes, thank you. So just to wrap that up, ladies and gentlemen, we are expecting to see 2020 as the largest ever recorded demand shock in the history of natural gas market, about 3% drop year on year. Most of that happening in mature gas markets, and that loss will be recovered next year. Loss will be recovered next year, but even though most of the losses will be recovered in 2021, the COVID crisis is likely to have longer lasting impact on future growth and some repercussions also in terms of longer term needs and what would be the investment appetite to develop further infrastructure. The IEA, of course, is closely monitoring the natural gas market developments since the beginning of the crisis. It is now developing a more regular approach to follow up market developments on a quarterly basis with market analysis short-term projection. Thank you very much for your attention, and it's now a pleasure to give the floor to Gergely Molnar. Thank you.
Okay, bom dia. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gergely Molnar. I'm a gas analyst within the Gas Coal and Power Division of the International Energy Agency, and it is a great pleasure to be here today with you, even if it is just in the virtual space. Before I start, I would like to thank you, Bruno, Dave, and Jean-Baptiste for their excellent scene-setting interventions. With the launch of the Novo Mercado, the gas program, Brazil embarked on a truly transformative process for its gas industry, market, and of course, consumers. And it is really great to see all the good progress which is happening on that front. Most recently, the new gas market law has been approved by the lower house of the Congress, and it is currently with the Senate. On this slide, you can see a very high-level overview of the gas market reform as it is happening in Brazil, a shift of paradigm from a vertically integrated model to a competitive market structure. Gas market reforms are usually a lengthy and complex process, with both the European and North American experience showing that it can take at least a decade to establish a competitive and well-functioning gas market. However, as highlighted in our recent commentary, strong political commitment, stringent regulation, and international experience sharing can help fast-track those market reforms, which in turn can hugely benefit economies recovering from the current global crisis. As our Deputy Executive Director highlighted, the agency has been facilitating Brazil's access to international best practices through a series of tailored events in constant communication with MME and with the kind support of the United Kingdom. Today, we are presenting insights from our work in 2019 and 20 with a focus on European experience in terms of gas market opening. Our next event, the IEA Brazil Gas Workshop, will take place on the 13th of November and will focus on the reform and modernization of the gas distribution sector. And here, I just really would like to thank you, our amazing community of international experts coming from several IEA member countries and representing a variety of key gas market stakeholders, including ministries, regulators, TSOs, academia, and the private sector. They have been a fundamental source of knowledge, and we would like to thank them all once again for their commitment and active involvement. On this slide, you can see some of the professionals who contributed to this common effort. And we have the chance today to have with us Markus Krug, Maria Junco, Paolo Maffei, Carla Robledo, and Patrick Heather. We will have the chance to hear their insights right after my presentation. And now we are moving to the more technical part of the discussion. What insights can we learn from the European experience in terms of gas market opening? But before going into that, I just really would like to highlight that each energy and each gas system is unique by nature. Hence, there is no single pathway to the establishment of a more competitive gas market. However, there is a number of factors which should be taken into account by policymakers and other relevant stakeholders during the market design phase and the implementation of regulatory measures. So what are the building bricks of a competitive gas market? First, a gas supply system able to meet average seasonal and peak demand requirements of customers is considered as an essential element to the establishment of a competitive gas market. The diversity of supply sources, and most importantly, a diversity of upstream suppliers can enhance competition and liquidity on the market. The availability of midstream flexibility, such as pipeline flex storage and regasification, allows not only for a greater security of supply, but also provides the physical space necessary for short-term trading and balancing actions. Second, the regulatory framework should be designed in a way to facilitate network access and enhance midstream flexibility. A key cornerstone of a competitive gas market is a liquid hub. Hub design should facilitate the development of trading, and we will discuss this in a couple of minutes. Fourth, market participants need to embrace this new gas market and the challenges and the opportunities it offers. Obviously, this is a learning process which involves a changing vision about the market, but also investment into the development of trading capabilities, acquisition of trading tools, training of the personnel, and so on. An important point is the reform of sales contracts. Any clauses which hinders the resale of natural gas or prohibits consumers from switching suppliers should be gradually eliminated to further enhance competition. Fifth, trading activity should be monitored either by the national regulatory authority or a designated independent institution to detect and prevent any form of market manipulation. This is of particular importance during the early phases of market development, when liquidity on the hubs is still relatively low, and hence the risk of market manipulation by a dominant player remains high. In the next couple of slides, I would like to focus on the regulatory aspects of the gas market reform. Gas networks are typical examples of natural monopolies. The owners of these networks are often involved in other parts of the gas value chain as well. When this is the case, the regulatory regime must make sure that network owners don't use their position to put other market players at a disadvantage. This is ensured by a variety of unbundling models, which effectively separate network operation from other competitive market activities, such as production, trading, or supply. The European experience shows that different unbundling models can coexist, with the ownership unbundling considered as the most effective one. Unbundling has to be complemented by network codes and guiding principles, which regulate third-party access to the gas system. This is to ensure that market players are not discriminated against each other and are all treated equally by the transmission system operator. The creation of a successful gas market requires common rules for capacity allocation, congestion management, tariffs, balancing, transparency, and data exchange. The regulatory regime should allow market players to access the gas infrastructure and the midstream flexibility products in an objective, non-discriminatory, and transparent manner. As such, in a competitive gas market, the traditional bilaterally negotiated long-term contracts are gradually disappearing and being replaced by alternative capacity allocation mechanisms, such as auctions. Tariffs have to be transparent, approved by the regulatory authority, should reflect costs incurred, and should be applied in a non-discriminatory manner. The balancing regime should be market-based and include imbalance charges, which are cost-reflective and set on the basis of the marginal price to necessitate market players to balance their portfolio as efficiently as possible. The transmission system operator should provide market players with operational transparency in terms of firm and interruptible capacity, tariffs, nominations, renominations, and actual physical flows, at least on a daily basis, through an open and transparent information platform. With gas production and consumption expected to increase in Brazil, thank you, it is important to establish a regular process to assess market demand for incremental capacity. In Europe, we have a two-step process when it comes to the development of new gas infrastructure. In the non-binding phase, market participants are invited to state their interest through a public consultation. In the case of demand indication, the TSO will proceed to the design phase and develop one or several project proposals which have to be approved by the regulatory authority. In the binding phase, the TSO will run an allocation procedure. If sufficient commitments from market players lead to a positive economic test, an incremental project is initiated. If instead the economic test is negative, the incremental capacity process is terminated. As mentioned earlier, a key cornerstone of a competitive gas market is the establishment of a liquid hub, which guarantees that gas is exchanged in a cost and time efficient manner. Hubs can be either physical, when referring to one particular geographical point, or virtual, within a well-defined entry-exit market zone, which allows market players to exchange natural gas disregard where it is located within the gas system. Hub design should facilitate the development of trading. Access to the hub should be provided on a non-discriminatory manner, licensing procedures should be transparent, and participation fees, if any, should not increase severely entry barriers. Besides title transfer, the hub operator may provide additional commercial services such as wheeling, parking, loaning, in order to enhance short-term flexibility and improve the firmness or physical deliverability of the hub. The offered product range should be diversified both in terms of time horizon and in terms of trading instruments to allow market participants not only to balance their short-term positions on the physical market, but also to manage price risk along the forward curve. And this is the new environment in which market players need to live now. It is a very different one from the traditional vertically integrated model where wholesalers could pass on natural gas from producers to consumers on a cost-plus basis. In this new model, midstream utilities and trading companies have to compete with each other for customers and for suppliers almost on a constant basis. And thanks to this constant competition between market players, Liquid Hub guarantees not only that gas is exchanged in a cost and time efficient manner, but also allows for price discovery, the actual and the expected value of natural gas. On this graph, we can see the spot price on TTF, the largest European gas hub. As such, the oil index pricing formulae in gas sales contracts can be gradually replaced by indices linked to hub pricing. Now, one comment we often hear is that the traded market has a very high level of volatility. When it comes to hub-based pricing formula, usually it is based on an average of several months of multiple traded products on the hub, which of course reduces the volatility. The reform of the gas distribution sector is key to bring the benefits of a competitive gas market to the burning tips of end consumers. As previously mentioned, this will be the key topic of our IEA Gas Brazil workshop to be held on the 13th of November. Here, I just would like to highlight key elements to consider during the reform process. A clear categorization of transmission and distribution activities is required. Unbundling of DSOs from vertically integrated energy companies will be needed. Allowed revenues and tariff structures should incentivize operational efficiency. The performance of gas retail markets should be monitored on a regular basis. Looking ahead, we need to acknowledge that there is no alternative to clean energy transition. In this context, further development of the Brazilian gas market could play an important role in two senses. First, the share of intermittent renewable sources is expected to increase to 20% in Brazil by 2030. Flexible gas-fired power plants enable the integration of variable renewables by providing backup capacity to the power system and supply security to end consumers. In the longer term, Brazil's existing and developing gas infrastructure can facilitate the deployment of low carbon gases, including biomethane, synthetic methane, and hydrogen. And here I just would like to highlight the huge potential Brazil has in biogas. The technical potential of biogas production in Brazil is about 80 BCM per year, placing the country third after the United States and China. As we see, Brazil embarked on a truly transformative process. One of the most important factors to make it a success is inclusiveness. We believe that enhancing flexibility is a key to promote more innovative and more effective ideas in the oil and gas sector and in the broader energy sector. However, as a recent IEA study highlighted, women's participations in the energy sectors, especially in the oil and gas sectors, remain well below other sectors. And Brazil is no exception in that case. There is a numerous measures that can be taken to tackle this issue, including setting targets for accelerating gender equality, including diversity and social inclusion requirements in government support schemes, unlocking the potential of young female talent by promoting mentorship programs and fostering leadership capabilities in the energy sector. I would like to thank you for your attention, and just to give some final considerations, gas market liberalization is a lengthy and complex process. While each market has unique challenges and opportunities, international experiences provide useful guidance. The Novo Mercado de Gas has the potential to address many of the key challenges that needs to be addressed in order to develop a competitive gas market in Brazil. A well-designed regulatory framework from the transmission system, national codes, clear guidelines, and continued engagement of all market actors are needed for a successful transition. A well-functioning and competitive gas market can be the gateway to unlock low-carbon technologies, as well as providing an opportunity to promote gender equality and inclusiveness in the energy sector to capture the benefits of a more diverse workforce. Brazil has all the ingredients for a successful gas market reform. The IEA will continue to support the Brazilian government as it moves towards implementing the Novo Mercado de Gas. Thank you for your kind attention, and now I have the great pleasure to introduce our international expert panel, Markus Krug from E-Control, Austria, Maria Junco from Enagás, Paulo Maffei from the PRISMA, the European Capacity Platform, Carla Robledo from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate of the Netherlands, and Patrick Hedder from the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies in the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gergely, for this introduction, and hello from Vienna to all of you. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, I mean, I can only say that I had the honor and really a great pleasure to follow the gas market reform in Brazil over the past few years. And I have to say, and also the drafting of the white paper, that some elements that Gergely just presented. And I have to say that I'm very much impressed by the positive developments that are taking place. So last year with the CADE settlement, which with Petrobras, that I think helps a lot in facilitating the effective unbundling of the TSOs. Now, just recently, the approval of the Bill of Law in the lower house, as mentioned already, and also even more recently, the launch of the transmission system transparency portal by ANP, which is, I think, a very, very crucial step also in towards a liberalized gas market and providing the necessary transparency to market participants. Yeah, I would just like to touch upon a few points which have been mentioned already. I think now comes a phase, well, the next step in the process towards a liberalized gas market will have to, there will be have the development of the network codes, and sort of what I call also the detailed market rules will be necessary. And this is a separate phase and not the least challenging one, I would say, because there are a number of interests, of course, involved in that, and there are sort of detailed rules necessary both for the purpose of standardization of processes, communications, units, but also their implementation then, of course, in the IT landscape of all the players. And of course, in a liberalized gas market, it brings with it that there are also a lot of new players or more players than in a monopoly market. So for all these players, it will be important to have the network codes there, to develop them. And I think, well, from the European experience, and that's my next point, my observation, last week, the Agency for the Cooperation of European Energy Regulators, we just published our annual market monitoring report, so which looks at developments of the gas wholesale market in Europe. And well, it's now even more than 10 years after the third package has been adopted in the EU, and we see, or we can really say, that the network codes in Europe have really delivered a lot of benefits and a lot of tangible results. So the report shows that in the EU, sort of well-functioning and integrated gas markets are covering now 3/4 of European gas demand. So that's not 100%, not everything is perfect, but at least I think we came along, we made a lot of progress over the last years, 10 years. It's quite a lot of time. And if I look back to these 10 years, I have to say that if we want to sort of look at that, so I would say approximately 5 years. So the first 5 years we spent actually with development of these network codes, sort of course, in prioritization. So first, the more important elements like congestion management, transparency, and so on. And the second part of those 10 years, I think we spent a lot also on the implementation, of course, at national level, in the IT system, in practice. But I think, yeah, results and benefits are materializing, both welfare benefits for consumers and for industry. That's also a clear outcome of this monitoring report. And so, I mean, I don't want to go further now into the details of the network codes, but I would just like to say that I think now setting up for this implementation phase and the more detailed work on the network codes, it's really important to set up a good process, an inclusive process, which ensures that all the stakeholders, the relevant stakeholders, can be heard, can be sort of participate. And I have to also say that looking back at the process in Europe, I think this worked quite well. I mean, both from as regulators giving some guidance, but then also very much the TSOs, so the Association of the TSOs, ENTSOG, I have to say, really developed a very good process for stakeholder involvement with a lot of workshops, consultations, and very, very transparently done with sort of well-prepared sessions, discussions, and then also minutes published after those all those workshops. So I think it was very good for all interested parties to follow this process and to also sort of provide input. So I would even say that this is can serve as a best practice regarding stakeholder involvement. But of course, it's it's a lot of work. It's detailed work. It requires all the stakeholders to be involved. But from my experience with what I've seen in Brazil is that there's such a good common spirit and understanding already. So I'm pretty sure that this next phase in this development will be very successful. And yeah, that's it. So with this, I'm pleased to pass the floor now on to Maria from Enagás. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marcus, and thank you very much to the International Energy Agency and to the Ministerio de Energía, de Minas y Energía do Brasil delegation for this kind hosting and for choosing the Spanish experience as a possible reference, especially for lessons learned. First of all, from Madrid, we send congratulations to all the Brazilian energy consumers, because they are led by a brave ministry that has undertaken such an ambitious and comprehensive reform. The challenge ahead encompasses all the dimensions that seek the sustainability of the energy sector, the environmental sustainability, above all, with CO2 reduction and renewable gases integration. But in this case, what I will talk about is more about security of supply, competitiveness, and social impact, which are the three main pillars of the new gas market. The most challenging role will be played by the regulators and the national authorities, because they should act as conductors of the whole thing that is coming now. First of all, with regards to the security of supply and physical availability, Brazil owes growing indigenous production and a pretty robust network and some interconnections with other countries for imports. But new investments should be achieved. In Spain, for example, we started with a low level of interconnection and a lack of indigenous production. So infrastructure planning for us and development of those infrastructures was certainly policy to market driven. And it has been quite important and quite relevant to develop the new gas market in Spain. Just with regards to the planning, I would suggest two main humble recommendations, which are first of all to set up clear and transparent criteria when investment decision making takes place, and secondly, being agile enough in permitting, etc., because market needs might change easily, and they will require an agile permitting and regulation. This is with regards to the security of supply, but to ensure competitiveness of this market, a third-party access regime must be developed, as it has been mentioned, allowing a more open capacity market. Therefore, it is necessary to develop capacity allocation mechanisms and some congestion management procedures, codes, and rules. The European model sets, for example, up standard products of capacity and market-based allocation mechanisms for these products. Therefore, regulation should include rules to progressively transfer this capacity from the incumbent to the rest of the market. Additionally, and it has been mentioned as well, the balancing rules of the network must be clear enough to support the creation of a mature gas hub, which could offer current and future gas price signals. Thus, it will be possible to have liquidity and the final consumer self-choosing option, which is quite relevant. In the European market, tariffs and tolls reflect the effective cost of the service provided. But in the Brazilian case, there are some discussions over the table, such as who should pay for security of supply, who should pay for flexibility. So these are key questions that the Brazilian market should rise and that will require much discussion. And finally, and to finish my short speech, just in the aspect of the social dimension, the energy sector is so complex and has such a worldwide impact that it will be necessary to ensure diversity and inclusion throughout the whole gas market value chain. gender diversity when designing strategies and making decisions is essential, but also diversity of generation, diversity of races, diversity and inclusion, which is what Brazilian government teaches us here today. So thank you very much. And that's all from my side. And I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Paolo, which might be there, who might be there.
Yes, Maria, I'm here. Thanks a lot for the floor. And I would like to wish to the colleague from Brazil, good morning, and to the colleagues from Europe, good afternoon. Today, I would like to mention you 3 elements that I think are relevant in the phase that you are facing in Brazil. So the development of new market rules that will guide the development of a Brazilian gas market. The first one is a behavioral element that has been already mentioned by Markus Krugge, that is the stakeholder involvement. Is absolutely critical to involve the stakeholders in the definition of the new market rules. For several reasons, but I would like to mention that having the stakeholder involved in the development of new market rules will help the possibility to have new investors investing in your gas market, but also newcomers joining a market that is hopefully going to be fully liberalized pretty soon and with many, many players. The second element that I want to mention is the standardization. Standardization in the different phase or activities of the supply chain is absolutely relevant. We saw it in Europe with the introduction of the different codes. Having standard processes in which that the market participant could follow will increase a lot in the past the possibility to take part, for example, in auctions. 15 years ago, if you want to buy gas from TTF and moving from TTF to Italy, it was really complicated and you have to have a lot of bilateral negotiation. Nowadays, thanks to the standard rules that have been implemented with a network code, it's easy to buy transportation capacity from TTF to Italy. And also, for example, the possibility to know exactly which rules will be applied or when the capacity will be published. This is something that is helping a lot the shipper in procuring what is needed to move gas in Europe. At the same time, clear rules and standard rules for taking part in the trading of the commodity is absolutely fundamental, but also standard rules in the way the information should be published to the final consumer is also relevant. At the end, we don't have to forget that the final consumer are probably the most important part of our supply chain because they are the ones that finally are using the natural gas that we are moving. And the third element that I would like to mention is the transparency. Transparency is absolutely fundamental in all the different elements of the supply chain. I think Gergely and Markus mentioned transparency with the utilization of infrastructure or the publication of information of the TSOs. This is just one part of the transparency that I think is needed in the market. Actually, I'm a big supporter of transparency in all the elements of the supply chain, obviously taking consideration the competition law. So these are the 3 elements that I think are absolutely relevant in this moment in time in your market. So to summarize, especially for the institution, is the involvement of the stakeholders in defining the new rules. In the new rules, I would recommend you to have a lot of attention on transparency and standardization of process in the different elements of the supply chain. I think transparency and standardization will create a lot of value for your market and will support the joining in the market of newcomers that will bring with their activities competition, lower prices, and for sure also liquidity. These are the 3 elements that I want to share with you. And I will be happy to give the floor to Mr. Patrick Effer.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Bom dia. across the ocean. It is an absolute pleasure to have been invited to participate in this IEA webinar today. Obviously, we, like the other presenters here, were part of the investigative stage by the IEA in developing their report, and I've been asked to present a very quick a few thoughts, which will echo my co-presenters that you've already heard from and will hear from. So if we can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to start with, you've probably seen this, the 3 slides you're going to see from me today. If any of you are familiar with my publications, you will already have seen them. But I'm just trying to emphasize some of the points that have already been made by other presenters. This is a stylistic view of what a hub-based gas market will look like. Gergely made the point in his presentation that we moved away from a value chain of supply without any trading. In many cases, in many countries, it went all the way from a producer to final consumer, usually through a monopoly or monopolistic system. In a hub-based gas market, you have your hub, a market area, as it's called in the EU, and the production or imports, whether they're pipeline or LNG, come into that. That is a physical movement of gas, but from a contractual and commercial point of view, it is delivered at the hub. The hub very often is the gas grid, the high pressure gas grid of a country, or in very large countries you may have separate regions. I suspect that would be the case for Brazil, that you may have to have separate regions, and therefore you could have separate hubs that would be interlinked. And then within that hub, people can trade, the producers, the importers can sell to wholesalers, to middlemen, or even to large final consumers, power stations, steel works, etc., might go to the market themselves. Otherwise, they would sell to distribution companies who would then pass it down to local consumers. And you can see in this flowchart diagram that you still have essentially the same type of companies and operations that you had in the previous world, but now it is a competitive market. There is full market access, third-party access, so long as you can work to and abide by stringent regulations and that are enforced. It obviously has to be a framework that attracts market participants, but you need a serious regulation to enforce it. And then you can export from that hub, as I say, maybe to a neighboring hub within the same country or to another country, but it is hub to hub rather than country to country. I think that's probably, the very important thing with this is that retrading takes place. It is not just a producer to wholesaler to consumer chain. It is trading in the middle, and you can retrade. And this is where I have, for example, something to say about the Russian Spymex market. They like to call it a hub. I call it just an exchange platform. But essentially, there's no retrading allowed on Spymex. It is just the delivery of physical gas from Gazprom or the independents to an off-taker going through an electronic exchange. So that is not really a hub. That is not really what I call trading. Next slide, please. This is another chart that you've probably seen. I published it as far back as 2015. And also my colleague at the time, Howard Rogers, with whom I developed this stairway to heaven, as I like to call it, path to maturity. It's not prescriptive. You don't have to do exactly as this says, but generally this is the process towards a liberalization and what one could consider to be a good hub. it has to offer the third-party access. That is the first thing that will set the market off. As Gergely and I think someone else said, it takes time. It will take 10 years or so. But if it is properly planned in advance, and now, of course, you have other examples in North America, but more particularly, I would say, in Europe. North America is a different sort of liberalization to what we've seen generally in Europe. You could short circuit that from 10 years to maybe 5, 6, but to do that, you really have to be very clear what it is you're doing. It's just been mentioned, my previous speakers were talking about standardization. Extremely important to have standardized contracts. The more standardized it is, the more you're going to concentrate liquidity. And liquidity begets liquidity, and it will attract more players. They know what they are, that what they are trading is very clear. You have to have very clear balancing rules on the physical side. So what constitute, well, how do you get there? I mean, liquidity, as I say, very important. Transparency, very important. But the assessment needs to be have defined measures and criteria. And I must say, it's taken quite a while in Europe to arrive at that stage. For the first part of the last decade, you know, the regulators were saying, you've got to meet these sort of criteria. And there wasn't as much stakeholder participation as there is today. And it was very difficult to achieve the goals. So I think that's very important to think about. Physical connectivity is also key to realize regional market areas. So in Brazil, if you do have 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, regional market areas, you need to make sure that there is very good physical connectivity between them so that you don't get large price differentials and, in fact, indeed, physical supply-demand differentials from area to area. And maybe most importantly, you need the right political willingness and cultural attitudes to trading in order to accept this change from a monopolistic era to one of commercial trading with third-party access, with people, companies that may never have been involved in gas before, coming in, but these people will bring liquidity to the market. This is very, very important. And if these hurdles can be overcome, there also then needs to be commercial acceptance for trading to flourish. And by that I mean that the established companies that have been trading for many years under a different regime need to accept that there is going to be change. So this is part of the cultural attitude. And I think just very, very briefly to say that in Europe, there have been very different levels of liberalization, very generally speaking, northwest down to east and southeast. And that is due to cultural differences, and commercial acceptance has varied. But overall, the directives are finally being followed. So it will take longer in those countries where the cultural attitude to change is different. So countries like Great Britain and the Netherlands in particular in the early days, and I'm glad Marcus has spoken today. I think I first met Marcus probably about 8, 9 years ago in the early teens when I went to visit CEGH and E-Control in Austria. And I think of the Central and East European countries, Austria has been the one most aligned to Northwest Europe and has been very keen to adopt the changes. So really good that he's on the panel and giving us his view. Next slide, please, last slide. Thank you. And finally, how do we get there? You know, and I've often had this comment when I give workshops and things. I recently did a 2.5-day workshop in Switzerland, one of the big 3 companies there, and they could only basically see one way to get into the market, and that was very much influenced by their traditional way of trading, which is what you see on the left of this flow chart, the negotiated contracts. They're not regulated, they're not standard. Everything can be discussed in a contractual agreement. the quality, the quantity, the delivery point, the time, the payments, etc., etc. There's full counterparty risk both ways. Then you go to the energy markets, and I think this is also quite important, is that some countries want to run before they can walk. I'm doing work in Ukraine at the moment, advising there. They want to, the UEEX wants to introduce futures contracts. They don't even have an OTC market, bilateral OTC market. So you're not going to be able to introduce, the English word for futures markets is a derivatives market. It's a derivative, a financial derivative on an underlying physical product. So if there is no OTC market, you're going to struggle. And that is what the liberalization should aim to achieve, is to develop a marketplace where the existing traders and new market participants will be willing and wanting to trade with each other and to start creating a liquid market, a physical liquid market with standardized products. It's generally speaking still not regulated, but some countries do have regulated OTC markets, but generally it's not, it's self-regulating. But they have standardized contracts. In Britain, it's the NBP 97, which became the NBP 15. In Europe, they use the EFEC contracts, standardized contracts, but it's still bilateral trading. There is still counterparty risk. But the important thing is you've had standardized products, and you have a variety of products from spot, prompt to forward. Then you go to the exchanges. These are always regulated. They will generally be cleared contracts. Therefore, they're financially guaranteed, standardized contracts based on the OTC market, and the same, you have a near-term, medium and long-term, and then possibly some financial things like options and swaps. So these are just the various ways to market. What are the functions? Well, a mature OTC gas market will give you open and transparent markets, will foster trading, they'll foster competition, and ultimately they'll give you the best price or the right price for gas at any given time. I can remember 10, 12, 15 years ago, in the early 2000s, the EU was always talking about liberalization in order to bring the price down. Yes, generally when you go from a monopolized industry to a competitive one, the price will initially fall, but it doesn't mean to say it will always stay low, but it will always be the most competitive price if it's a very liquid market. It will attract many participants of different types, and they bring liquidity, and the liquidity allows the ability to physically adjust portfolio volumes, but especially to financially risk manage the gas portfolios. So these markets can provide security of supply and security of demand. They provide a marketplace for the buying and selling of sometimes, usually even marginal quantities of physical gas. But the most important thing is they provide secure risk management tools. So what do the exchanges bring on top of that? And I'm just finishing here. They provide very good price discovery and transparency, better usually than the OTC markets. Because they're regulated markets, they're usually obliged to make their prices and traded volumes public. They provide the ability to separate the price function from the supply function. They can provide for a bit of physical balancing, but generally speaking, of the volumes traded on the exchanges in Europe, a very, very small percentage, somewhere between 1% and 5%, actually end up as being physically delivered, depending on the exchanges and the countries. But again, risk management, and in this case, sometimes more so than OTC, because of the different financial and contractual nature of trading on exchanges, a lot of companies will use the exchange contracts to risk manage their portfolios through a secure and regulated market. So next slide, please. I would say thank you very much, and I now would like to pass on to Carla, who's going to give you her thoughts. Carla, your turn.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning and good afternoon. And thank you for the IEA for the invitation to be here. I was honored to be invited also to give a presentation during the IEA technical visit for Brazilian gas experts back in January in the Netherlands, where I discussed the developments around hydrogen in our country. And to see also the enthusiasm with which all the experts were working on to learn from the European experience, and in particular the Dutch experience. And as well, I'm also very impressed by the progress made since then, despite the unfortunate developments this year with the coronavirus. So congratulations to the Brazilian government for achieving this milestone. And this reform package for Brazil's natural gas market will provide a more competitive market, which will undoubtedly attract private investments for the gas sector, and will allow to bring lower cost energy to the Brazilian system. On the longer term and in the future, this existing gas infrastructure, more than new to develop gas infrastructure, and also the knowledge along with it that will be developed, will be key in the transition to a cleaner energy system with the use of low carbon gases such as clean hydrogen and green gas. Processes such as electricity generation and chemical processes in the industry can easily switch to these low carbon gases without further major investments themselves, and utilizing the existing gas infrastructure and know-how. So on the short term, what we see here is that lower natural gas prices will lead to lower hydrogen prices made from natural gas with CO2 capture, what we call blue hydrogen. While on the longer term, we aim at using green hydrogen or hydrogen produced from renewable electricity with water, which can act as a bridge between the electricity and the gas system, providing much more flexibility to the energy system. Further, Brazil has a large potential for development of biomethane arising from its biomass supply from residues formed, among others, sugarcane and dairy industry. And lastly, for the power sector to become fully CO2 neutral, beside renewable power installations, gas-fired plants will still be necessary to provide a reliable energy supply. So both blue and green hydrogen could be used to make these power plants run without CO2 emissions. For example, here in the Netherlands, we aim to have 440 megawatts power plant in the northern Netherlands by 2023 to be fired with low carbon hydrogen, which can lead to a CO2 emission reduction of 1.3 million tons per year. All this experience, all this infrastructure can be in Brazil reutilized then for example, hydrogen. From the lessons learned so far in the Netherlands, what I would like to point out and strongly recommend is that newly built gas infrastructure such as pipelines, compression stations, gas turbines, they need to be made compatible also for low carbon gases. As well, the installation of parallel pipelines could be later appreciated to allow transfer of both biomethane and hydrogen, as we see here in the Netherlands. With this, I would like to give back the word to Mariano, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carla, and thank you very much to our group of international experts, and also to my two colleagues from the IEA for these presentations and interventions. I would now like to pass the floor to Simone Araújo. Simone is the Director for Natural Gas at the Brazilian Ministry of Mines and Energy. Simone will be moderating a quick panel from Brazilian specialists from 4 institutions: the Ministry of Mines and Energy, the Energy Research Company, the Association of Brazilian TSOs, ATEGAS. Simone, the floor is yours.
Obrigada, muito obrigada, Mariano. Bom dia a todos. Iniciamos essa sessão junto com a Heloísa, da empresa de pesquisa energética, junto com o Hélio, da Agência Nacional do Petróleo, junto com o Rogério Manso, da Associação dos Transportadores de Gás. De início, eu queria fazer um especial agradecimento à Agência Internacional de Energia, essa parceria iniciada, firmada em 2017 e que se concretizou a partir de um conjunto de eventos que fizemos no início de 2018, tem sido certamente uma das melhores experiências que temos passado. essa experiência ela tem como lastro, como suporte, os recursos que vêm por meio do Reino Unido do Prosperity Funding, essa possibilidade de desfrutar ou de trocar as melhores experiências, as melhores práticas internacionais, ela está claramente ancorada nos objetivos de políticas públicas que estamos construindo no âmbito do mercado de gás. E, obviamente, a oportunidade de termos ouvido esse rico painel que nos antecedeu, em conjunto com as palavras iniciais feitas no painel de abertura, nos ajudam enormemente a fazer esse processo de construção das discussões do novo mercado. E, obviamente, eu gostaria de agradecer especialmente a audiência, né, que está conosco aqui nesse webinar. Se fôssemos imaginar onde nós estamos nessa discussão que estamos fazendo ao longo dessa manhã, acho que o primeiro aspecto que salta aos nossos olhos é que, obviamente, a reforma do mercado de gás, ela não é um processo simples. Ele é um processo, obviamente, que exige esforços dos vários elementos da indústria do gás, mas que todo esse conjunto de esforços compensa, obviamente. E ao olharmos a inspiração no mercado europeu, de certa maneira a gente consegue, em alguma medida, acelerar esse processo e cortar algumas etapas, aumentando, obviamente, a nossa chance de sucesso. O Brasil fez escolhas de políticas públicas de quebra de monopólio há mais de 20 anos, mas é certo dizer que apenas nos últimos anos fizemos os movimentos mais relevantes. E eu queria fazer um especial destaque ao conjunto de decisões que foram tomadas pelo Conselho Nacional de Política Energética no ano passado, que ancoraram, obviamente, os aspectos mais relevantes do novo mercado de gás, um programa que já veio sendo, de certa maneira, listado aqui nessa nossa discussão desde a apresentação do Bruno e foi perpassado pelo conjunto de especialistas que nos antecederam. Obviamente, quando a gente fala do Conselho Nacional de Política Energética, a gente destaca a Resolução 16/2019 e a criação do Comitê de Monitoramento da Abertura do Mercado de Gás, que junta o Ministério de Minas e Energia, o Ministério da Economia, a Agência Nacional do Petróleo, a EPE, o CAD, o nosso órgão antitrust, e a Casa Civil da Presidência da República, tendo mais recentemente um suporte fundamental do BNDES, o nosso Banco de Desenvolvimento, e todos esses agentes em conjunto contribuem, cada um em sua área de atuação, fortemente nesse processo de abertura. E é importante destacar também o termo de compromisso de cessação, o acordo firmado entre o CAD e a Petrobras, ainda em 2019, que nos conduz nesse processo de transição, em conjunto com a resolução CNPE, uma transição segura. Obviamente que agora nós estamos vivendo um momento crucial no mercado de gás no Brasil. E esse momento é certamente a tramitação no âmbito do Senado Federal da nova Lei do Gás. A Lei do Gás ela foi aprovada na Câmara dos Deputados no início desse mês, exatamente no dia 1º de setembro. Todo o conjunto de aperfeiçoamentos legislativos que estão na Lei do Gás, eles estão integralmente aderentes às decisões do novo mercado de gás. E a gente espera fortemente que essa tramitação no Senado também ocorra de uma forma muito célere. E eu queria lembrar de um aspecto que eu considero um bom presságio, né? No dia 23 de outubro do ano passado, quando estávamos ali em meio ao seminário promovido pela IEA no Ministério de Minas e Energia, a gente teve a aprovação do substitutivo na Comissão de Minas e Energia da Câmara. Então, eu entendo que a gente tem, nesse evento da IEA, certamente um bom presságio, que ele possa nos trazer a boa sorte que tivemos no ano passado. E já concluindo a minha intervenção para ouvir os nossos próximos palestrantes, eu acho que a gente precisa destacar que o Brasil ele move-se na direção de um mercado aberto, dinâmico e competitivo. E é fundamental que a gente fale da ideia de movimento, porque um processo de reforma é um processo que se dá em diversas fases. Então, desde a ideia de desenho de mercado, quando a gente estabelece claramente quais são os pontos que são centrais nessa abertura, o acesso às infraestruturas essenciais, o aperfeiçoamento do sistema de transporte, medidas de estímulo à competição e a liberalização do mercado, a gente faz aqui, nesse momento, um especial recorte à questão do aperfeiçoamento no transporte de gás, porque é certo que o acesso ao sistema de transporte de gás é uma condição, ou melhor, uma pré-condição fundamental para que se desenvolva um mercado concorrencial no Brasil. Então, obviamente, passar pela discussão de agenda regulatória, de planos de expansão, código de rede, regras de interconexão e coordenação entre os transportadores é fundamental. Então, considerando todos esses instrumentos que vão produzir esse aperfeiçoamento no transporte, eu passo agora a palavra ao Hélio, que vai nos trazer uma visão do órgão regulador sobre esses temas. O Hélio é superintendente de infraestrutura e movimentação da Agência Nacional do Petróleo, Gás Natural e Biocombustíveis e estará compartilhando conosco agora as suas informações. Obrigado, Hélio.
Bom dia a todos no Brasil, boa tarde a quem está na Europa. Eu tenho uma curta apresentação, next please, sobre a reforma que nós estamos trazendo e que o novo mercado de gás trouxe um novo desenho de mercado, né, que necessita de um período de transição e que está sendo implementado em uma agenda regulatória, por enquanto ainda, no que é possível fazer da forma infralegal, a partir da edição do Decreto 9616, a partir da Resolução CNPE 16 do ano passado e do TCC firmado entre Petrobras e CADE, que traz uma série de, especialmente na resolução, trouxe uma cronologia da implementação das etapas, da Resolução 16 CNPE, onde tem a separação do transporte das atividades competitivas, ou seja, o unbundling no transporte, né, a separação do transportador das outras atividades como fundamento para um mercado competitivo. Provavelmente, daqui a 2 semanas, a ANP vai botar em consulta pública a resolução que trata do unbundling no transporte, da independência do transportador. Ela deve estar entrando na semana que vem, deve estar na RD da semana que vem, provavelmente daqui a 2 semanas ela vai estar em consulta pública, a minuta dessa resolução, acompanhada de uma nota técnica, que foi elaborada foi muito bem elaborada. Na semana que vem, nós devemos estar colocando em consulta pública uma nota técnica sobre o desenho conceitual desse mercado de gás natural que a gente quer, com sistema de entrada e saída, com tarifas aprovadas pela ANP, com coordenação de transportadores no sistema de transporte, ou seja, com gestor de área de mercado, que vamos ter que necessitar dos códigos de rede, né, dos network codes, e na transparência, como já foi dito por diversos palestrantes, a transparência na oferta e na contratação de serviços. Tá? Desse novo desenho de mercado também entrariam o gas release e o capacity release. Esse documento que nós vamos colocar, ele está focado especialmente para a revisão das nossas resoluções de carregamento e comercialização. Então, essa é a primeira consulta, interação com a sociedade, para extrairmos informações e para colocarmos o modelo que nós estamos pensando de comercialização, carregamento e balanceamento para a gente trazer subsídios da sociedade. Esse documento ficará em consulta pública por 45 dias e, depois disso, nós deveremos fazer uma série de workshops para tratar desse tema, porque ele tem diversas nuances, então devem ser diversos workshops que nós devemos levar a cabo para tratar desse tema. The next, please. Então, essa reforma, como eu falei, ela vem em etapas e que a primeira delas é a independência do transportador, a organização do transportador, como já foi dito, em termos de códigos de redes, como gestor de mercado, né? A adoção da doutrina de Essential Facilities, de instalações essenciais, para o acesso às UPGNs, terminais de GNL e do escoamento da produção, sendo que a ANP já formou um grupo de trabalho para tratar desse tema especificamente, onde vai um grupo interno multidisciplinar, uma vez que são diversas áreas que cuidam dessas instalações, né? A área de produção de combustíveis trata das UPGNs, a Superintendência de Infraestrutura e Movimentação trata dos terminais de GNL e a Superintendência de Desenvolvimento da Produção trata dos gasodutos de escoamento da produção. Então, foi criado um grupo interno para tratar desse tema de acesso às infraestruturas essenciais. E, por último, a oferta de produtos, contratos homogêneos de transporte e de capacidade de transporte. Tá? Isso aí, a gente já lançou no ano passado uma chamada pública da TBG. Nós estamos fazendo a segunda chamada pública, ela entrou essa semana em consulta pública, a consulta pública está começando hoje, vai ficar em consulta pública o edital e o contrato por 15 dias para receber sugestões da sociedade. O contrato mudou e o edital mudaram, tiveram pequenas alterações, por isso a gente está fazendo uma consulta de 15 dias e até o fim do ano a gente leva a cabo essa segunda chamada pública. E essa chamada pública, a gente tem expectativa de contratar capacidade disponível do gasoduto da TBG para os próximos 5 anos, ou seja, no período de 21 a 25. Adicionalmente, já foram lançados, a TBG já lançou os contratos de curto prazo. São contratos padronizados que podem ser com capacidade... Desculpa. Com capacidade diária, mensal e trimestral, com duração mensal, diária, mensal e trimestral. São contratos padronizados que foram aprovados pela agência, estão em prateleira, né? Eles estão lá e podem ser adquiridos pelos agentes, pelos carregadores a qualquer tempo. Esses contratos já estão lá colocados. The next, please. Então, vamos lá. As principais forças e obstáculos no desenvolvimento desse mercado de gás natural que já foram tratados na forma infralegal numa parte e estão sendo endereçados no projeto de lei que já foi aprovado pela Câmara dos Deputados e que será, se Deus quiser, em breve está no Senado para ser aprovado, né? Está em debate no Senado no momento para ser aprovado. Então, para a falta de forças competitivas, nós necessitamos de mais supridores e consumidores. A gente vai lançar também, provavelmente no início do ano que vem, ou no fim desse ano, uma chamada pública incremental da TBG. Apareceram diversos agentes, mais de 1,5 de agentes, querendo contratar capacidade, interessados no projeto de ampliação da capacidade do Gasbol, especialmente no trecho sul. Então, a gente espera que, com a abertura do mercado, com esses contratos padronizados, com chamadas públicas regulares e com chamadas públicas incrementais para retirar eventuais gargalos existentes na malha de transporte, que nós possamos dar esse acesso aos terceiros interessados ao sistema de transporte. E isso já está acontecendo agora. Para a falta de uma legislação abrangente, a gente tem a nova projeto de lei, né, que traz o novo desenho do mercado. Para a falta de forças que deem precificação para o gás natural, nós temos que implantar os trade hubs, os hubs de negociação, né, os hubs virtuais de negociação e a bolsa de negociação, né? Para a falta de acesso de terceira parte, dos terceiros interessados, né, nós temos que fazer o gerenciamento da congestão contratual. Nós estamos iniciando o estudo disso agora, tá? Nós estamos aplicando a doutrina de infraestruturas essenciais, né? Está um grupo de trabalho montado na ANP já para discutir esse tema, e o lançamento de contratos de curto prazo. Isso já foi feito pela TBG e a gente espera que em breve as outras transportadoras também façam esse lançamento. Primeiramente em contratos interruptíveis, e a gente espera que a partir do primeiro semestre do ano que vem já estejam com contratos extraordinários de curto prazo firmes, né? E para a falta de uma infraestrutura de transporte ainda deficiente, a troca do modelo, no projeto de lei, tem a troca da forma de outorga do modelo de concessão para o modelo de autorização de novos gasodutos, e com planos anuais de desenvolvimento a serem apresentados e aprovados pelas transportadoras. A gente espera que a gente tenha um mercado que seja pujante, que possa se desenvolver mais rapidamente. Tá? Então, era isso que the next please, era isso que eu tinha para dizer. Eu agradeço a todos o interesse e a participação, e eu passo a palavra para Heloísa, que é a diretora da empresa brasileira da empresa de pesquisa energética.
Obrigada, Hélio. Bom dia, boa tarde a todos. Gostaria de começar agradecendo a Agência Nacional de Energia pelo convite. Bom, a Simone, além da exposição brilhante dos painelistas que a gente teve anteriormente, da equipe de especialistas da Agência Nacional de Energia, e depois disso a Simone começou falando do programa Novo Mercado de Gás e como ele foi estruturado. O Hélio acabou de, numa excelente capacidade de síntese, sintetizar tudo que a ANP tem feito e detalhou as medidas que vão ser brevemente adotadas para a gente superar os obstáculos observados e destacados pelos painelistas anteriores. Eu gostaria de falar aqui que uma visão de futuro para o Brasil exige que a gente considere as necessidades de segurança energética do país como uma condição necessária para viabilizar o desenvolvimento econômico e social. A energia é um fator fundamental para o desenvolvimento que o Brasil precisa. E quando a gente observa no nosso planejamento energético os requisitos do país no futuro, esses estudos levam ao aumento de demanda por energia, mesmo que a gente considere todos os ganhos de eficiência projetados. E ainda considerando que a gente está diante de um processo de transição energética, e um processo onde a gente busca segurança energética aliada aos esforços de combate às mudanças climáticas e a preservação do meio ambiente, desenvolver a indústria do gás natural se torna cada vez mais essencial para o Brasil. O setor energético ele tinha pautas extremamente importantes antes da crise, que permanecem absolutamente válidas, e dentre as reformas que a gente desenhou para permitir um salto de credibilidade no ambiente de investimentos, para permitir a promoção de um melhor uso dos recursos energéticos, uma delas é o novo mercado de gás. Como a Simone destacou, o novo mercado de gás ele foi um programa desenhado como tendo 4 pilares: a promoção da concorrência, a harmonização das regulações estaduais e federais, a integração do setor de gás com o setor de energia elétrica industrial e a remoção das barreiras tributárias, principalmente a comercialização de gás natural. E um passo importante para a gente atingir esse objetivo, um passo urgente, na verdade, é a aprovação de um novo marco legal para esse setor que promova as transformações necessárias para a gente aumentar a competitividade, atrair os investimentos e criar um ambiente favorável à redução de preços. Os estudos da EPE indicam que a mudança de outorga, assim como já foi amplamente destacado aqui anteriormente, ao longo desse webinar, a mudança do modelo de outorga dos gasodutos, a gente passar para um regime de autorização, as mudanças infralegais correspondentes a toda mudança de modelo que o Hélio destacou e os critérios de independência de transportadores, eles trazem sim os condicionantes necessários para a gente mudar o atual cenário que a gente vê, que é um cenário ainda com investimentos aquém do desejado. Um outro ponto que eu queria destacar e que também é importante num horizonte de curto prazo e também depende da aprovação do novo marco legal é a gente avançar na integração do gás natural e do setor elétrico, também um dos pilares do novo mercado de gás. Os custos e os riscos dessa interface têm sido um objeto de amplo debate entre os agentes de mercado e o governo, e também são objeto de um grupo de trabalho específico dentro do governo federal. A ideia é a gente identificar um melhor modelo de negócios para a monetização do gás natural nacional. Um outro desafio que a gente tem pela frente no horizonte de curto prazo é a viabilização da infraestrutura de transporte de gás. Estamos hoje passando por esse debate. Mas na EPE nós acreditamos que a abertura do mercado de gás, a multiplicidade dos agentes, o estabelecimento de novos polos consumidores vão ajudar a revelar as demandas de gás natural, contribuir para a expansão da malha e viabilizar essa expansão de uma forma competitiva, em desenhos de mercado competitivos. Eu queria terminar lembrando que o papel central do gás natural está muito claro na estratégia de longo prazo do Brasil. E a promoção do desenvolvimento de um mercado competitivo da infraestrutura de gás natural, ela passa também pela identificação de sinergias com possíveis futuras soluções na transição energética. Eu queria destacar, como já foi destacado, o biogás e o hidrogênio. Essa sinergia está identificada como uma diretriz estratégica de longo prazo do país. E para a gente aproveitar isso, a gente também precisa hoje de um senso de urgência para avançar nas reformas. Entretanto, o modelo de transição para um mercado plural, competitivo, ele não acontece do dia para a noite. A gente viu aqui que a experiência de outros mercados, em particular do mercado europeu, mostra que esse processo pode durar de 10 a 15 anos. Mas a gente tem urgência para resolver o problema de competitividade do gás natural no Brasil, mas a gente tem que ter consciência de que a gente está começando um processo que vai se alongar e vai terminar ao longo da década corrente, até o final de 2030. E para a gente começar e terminar no horizonte que o país precisa, a gente acredita que agora é a hora de reunir os esforços em prol da abertura do mercado de gás, que é exatamente o que a Simone e o Hélio destacaram antes de mim. Bom, com essa breve introdução, eu passo a palavra ao Rogério Manso, presidente da Associação de Empresas de Transporte de Gás Natural, a ATGás. Bom, agradeço.
Bom dia a todos, prazer estar aqui. Se puderem colocar no ar a minha apresentação, pode ir direto para o segundo slide, por gentileza. O objetivo, essencialmente, é compartilhar com vocês ações que as transportadoras estão tomando dentro desse novo cenário. A forma como eu busquei agregar aqui foi, essencialmente, pegar alguns dos postulados colocados pela IEA e agregar nossas ações para fazer uma relação aqui de lógica entre essas ações. O primeiro, essencialmente, a gente pode ver que ele ressalta, né, a capacidade de entrega física, flexibilidade e uma forma de se facilitar a comercialização. Dentro desse aspecto, eu agrego essas atividades, as da primeira linha são atividades já concluídas, tá? Então, hoje, as atividades de programação são feitas, mesmo naquelas transportadoras que antes eram do Grupo Petrobras, já são feitas de forma independente por essas transportadoras. Da mesma forma, desenvolver a capacidade de um sistema que era essencialmente focado em um consumidor único, poder receber dentro dos seus sistemas múltiplos consumidores. Terceiro, capacidade de você lidar com o sistema entrada e saída. Para quem acompanha mais de perto, isso significa a implementação do sistema, né, do ajuste CNF 3 2018. Eu acho que para quem entende dos impactos tributários envolvidas, pode precisar de se implementar um sistema desses, né? Eu acho que em qualquer lugar do mundo, mas em particular no nosso país, é bastante complexo. Esse sistema ele já está implantado hoje nas 3 transportadoras do sistema interligado, NTS, TBG e TAG. Nós já estamos indo para o 3º ciclo de faturamento, principalmente da NTS e TBG, né? Um sistema que envolveu uma série de interações entre transportadores, carregadores, entre os transportadores em si, entre as áreas de programação e as áreas de faturamento. Enfim, esses 3 então já estão aí disponíveis e funcionando. Em processo de implementação, nós temos os itens seguintes, né? A primeirização, o desengargalamento do sistema, principalmente em áreas onde há questões de classe de locação, que nós estamos recuperando a capacidade do sistema operar. Vocês estão, espero que estejam me ouvindo bem, eu estou recebendo um sinal aqui de problema de rede, vou tirar meu vídeo, tá? Retomando aqui, então, recuperação da capacidade do sistema, principalmente onde nós temos questões na rede de redução de pressão e, consequentemente, de potencial de redução de vazão, interconexão dos sistemas e onde os sistemas já estão interconectados, estabelecimento de contratos de interconexão e também, entre as transportadoras, um trabalho muito intenso de se trazer as melhores práticas, né? Revisão das capacidades, em função principalmente do termo o TCC da Petrobras, calendário de chamadas públicas, novos produtos de transporte, buscando nos adequar às necessidades do mercado e o desenvolvimento de marketplaces de capacidade. Hoje, o objetivo tem sido, quem conhece, quem está já lidando com a TBG, ou quem está acompanhando isso, pode ver que nós estamos trabalhando com sistemas de ponta que buscam facilitar a compra, como se você estivesse comprando basicamente um bem numa Amazon, num serviço desses, com grande facilidade. Além disso, muito se falou aqui dos códigos de rede, os network codes, como sendo importantes para que um sistema liberalizado funcione bem. É algo já previsto dentro da resolução 16 do CNPE, que a coordenação das operações seja feita dentro do sistema interconectado pelas transportadoras através de códigos de rede. De nosso lado, nós já estamos nos antecipando ao que está previsto na lei, que esses códigos devem ser desenvolvidos. Nós já estamos trabalhando há vários meses com grupos de trabalho entre as transportadoras, buscando alinhar as suas visões. Já temos 2 códigos de rede minutados. Estamos começando esse mês a discussão do 3º código de rede, para ter as minutas prontas para, assim que a lei seja aprovada, podemos seguir em frente com o processo conforme previsto em lei. E, por último, destaca-se aí a importância de definições claras entre das categorizações do que são sistemas de transporte e sistemas de distribuição. Naquilo que toca os sistemas de transporte, a Constituição brasileira, com toda clareza, define o seu artigo 177, no item 4, no inciso 4 do artigo 177, que a União Federal tem competência privativa para regular o transporte de gás natural por gasodutos. Dentro do projeto de lei, agora chamado de 476-2020, o antigo 6407, seu artigo 1º já deixa claro, na sua primeira sentença, que ali se estão estabelecendo as regras para a exploração econômica das atividades de transporte de gás natural por dutos e, mais, que elas são reguladas pela ANP. Posteriormente, no artigo 7, são feitas as definições dos critérios para que um duto seja definido como de transporte de gás natural, né, no caso. E eu destaco aqui, inclusive, o avanço do item 6, onde se define que devem ser definidos também, ou podem ser definidos também, por características técnicas. Do nosso ponto de vista, como transportadores, como aqueles que vão investir dentro desse setor para assegurar que essa malha continue crescendo, continue sendo interligada e, principalmente, que ela possa cumprir esse papel de ser o marketplace, onde as trocas vão acontecer entre as diversas fontes, diversos consumidores. Nós entendemos que é essencial a aprovação do projeto, especialmente nesse item 7, em particular no item 7.6, para que ele garanta que exista um sistema interconectado e não um sistema ilhado, e que qualquer consumidor em qualquer estado possa comprar em qualquer outro estado dentro da sua área de mercado. E por aqui eu termino e devolvo para o Mariano.
Thank you very much, Rogério, and thank you, Simone, Elio, Eloisa, and Rogério for these very interesting interventions. I am conscious of time. We have already gone 4 minutes over the time that was stipulated in the invitation, but I would like to ask a couple of questions we have received from the audience to our group of speakers. I would invite all speakers, if you can now, to open your camera. And I'm going to address the questions that we have received to someone in particular. The first question I have would be for Markus Krug from eControl. There is a question here related to the classification of pipelines, and one of the points that is being discussed in Brazil in the discussion about the new law is the prerogative of ANP to classify which pipeline is transmission. In EU experience, is there anything that we could add to this discussion? And should local distribution companies have the autonomy to build its own pipelines regardless of capacity?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and also I think mentioned in the last slide from Rogério. So I think what at EU level, I'm afraid there is no solution, because at EU level, the definition of transmission and distribution are rather, I would say, not as concrete as necessary to really have a clear-cut separation of the two. So that leads to the next step, to look at the national level, so in the member states, and there I think there are useful experiences, like I think in the UK, but I'm probably not the best person, but I think there it's also a sort of pressure. The pressure level is a decisive criterion. So below, I think 32 bar would be distribution, and above transmission. For example, in Austria, this is also handled at the federal level. So we have actually a list in the law which lists all these transmission pipelines, because well, first of all, they are cross-border in nature, so they are for also transiting purposes. So they are listed in the law. So that's a second approach in some of, at least in Austria. And yeah, I think the recommendation that we have is clear. I mean, I think there should be a definition, because also of the different responsibilities for regulating the different pipelines. And yeah, I think it makes sense, whoever, to have a say on which category a pipeline should actually fall into.
Thank you very much, Marcus. The next question I have is from Carla Robledo, Carla Robledo. The question is about low carbon gases and whether there is an expectation that they would become a significant part of the energy matrix. In this case, the question, I assume, was about Brazil, but I was wondering, Carla, if you could share your views regarding what role will low carbon gases play in the future energy matrix of the Netherlands and around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Yes, so we see that on the long term and looking to 2050, at least 1/4 of the energy matrix will be provided by hydrogen for different uses, especially for industry as feedstock and also for mobility. Because for long range distances, which also would be very applicable for Brazil, for trucks, for trains, there are very few other alternatives to really decarbonizing the mobility. So here we see a big role for hydrogen in the transition, of course, blue hydrogen, as I mentioned in my intervention, but on the long term, we want to fully support the green hydrogen development. And a smaller part also for residential heating with, well, in Brazil that will be less, but especially for the feedstock in the industry and for mobility.
Thank you very much, Carla. The next question I have is for Eloisa Borges from EPE. Eloisa, there's a question here about how to make the associated gas that is produced in Brazil competitive in the Brazilian coast, considering the large investments required in infrastructure. I understand that you're currently organizing an event on a similar topic.
Sorry. Should I answer in Portuguese or in English? I got confused.
In Portuguese, it's okay. Whatever you prefer.
Bom, a monetização do gás, ela é desafio. E, como o Mariano falou, a gente tem, a EPE está organizando um webinar hoje, às 6 horas do Brasil. Convido você a assistir, especificamente sobre estratégias e alternativas para a monetização do gás natural offshore. A viabilidade econômica do gás, o preço que o gás vai chegar na costa, ele depende de alguns fatores, né? Da distância, do volume transportado, do custo de produção do próprio campo. O gás a preços competitivos, e aí a gente, no Plano Nacional de Energia, nos estudos mesmo no Plano Decenal de Energia, a EPE deixa claro que o que a gente está vendo é um mix de contratos. O gás a preços competitivos, ele depende de escala. Depende da gente ter a produção de gás natural aqui e ter uma competição entre fornecedores, ter uma competição na comercialização que viabilize a gente atingir esses preços competitivos. A manutenção de uma situação de monopólio certamente não permite a gente atingir esse objetivo. Então, bom, a sua pergunta, como faremos para fazer com que o gás associado chegue a preços competitivos? A gente, considerando os custos de escoamento da costa, a gente acha que o preço do break-even do gás natural, ele chega na costa a preços competitivos. E a gente tem um estudo publicado sobre isso, né? Os custos de escoamento por gasoduto e os custos para outras modalidades de alternativas tecnológicas. Então, não é uma questão exatamente de custos de escoamento. O preço competitivo para o consumidor final, e aí principalmente para o consumidor industrial e termoelétrico, né, da indústria termoelétrica, ele vai depender do quanto que a gente introduz de competição para viabilizar esse mercado funcionar. Não é, e aí o nosso estudo detalha bastante o que impede o gás natural chegar aqui a preços competitivos não é exatamente o custo de escoamento. Se a gente considerar apenas os custos da construção dos gasodutos, é possível que a gente tenha gás natural nacional a preços bastante competitivos para o nosso mercado interno. E aí eu convido você a assistir o webinar, porque a gente detalha, tem a matriz de custo especificamente. Aí eu posso detalhar, a gente pode detalhar, debater mais tarde ou por e-mail, exatamente quais são as nossas premissas para eu estar fazendo essa afirmativa. Obrigada.
Thank you very much, Eloisa. And I believe we have time for a final question before we move on to the closing remarks. This final question is for Maria Junco from Enagás in Spain. The question is about whether Petrobras should be providing flexibility services to minimize risks during the transition to a competitive market. So it's a question about supplier risk during the transition. How important would this be for the liberalization process?
Thank you, Mariano. Certainly, security of supply here is a key question. Therefore, flexibility is an essential tool that the market should have to guarantee that the market is going to be developed and the new services are going to be given to the consumer. For example, in Europe, we have some underground storages, or in our case in Spain, we take for granted with the LNG terminals that we have some flexibility given by those facilities. And we agree that Petrobras should provide these services, these flexibility services, to guarantee that the gas is withdrawn to all the consumers, and that the market can flow, can move, can have some flexibility to move up and down. Another question is who should pay for this flexibility? Should the consumers pay for it? Should the government pay for it? This is a question that should be answered, but of course, flexibility and avoiding risks are two key elements that should be solved before facing the new market.
Thank you very much, Maria. And unfortunately, we don't have time for additional questions. I saw in the Q&A function of Zoom that Patrick has also been answering some questions. So thank you, Patrick, very much for that. And with that, I'm afraid we're running out of time, and I would like to invite my colleague, Jörg Husar. Jörg is a Latin America program manager here at the IEA, as well as Aldo Junior, who is a general coordinator for natural gas infrastructure at MME, to provide some closing remarks to finish. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Mariano, and for everyone on the preceding interesting panel. So with this event today, we cover another milestone in our process in this dialogue on gas market reform. And actually, it circles back very well to the first thing we did back in 2017, which was a series of 4 video conferences, exactly, back at that time. And at the time, it was not yet that usual to do video conferences. And we thought it was a very innovative way of doing this dialogue instead of doing workshops and so on in person. And so now we're, for the unfortunate circumstances of COVID-19, we're now doing that more regularly, but also thankfully, thanks to everybody's cooperation, it's working very well, as this today's webinar also showed once again. So it's a process that, as Dave Turk, our acting executive director, deputy executive director, pointed out at the very beginning, this type of process is exactly what the IEA would like to implement with countries, a process where IEA acts as the middleman for experiences between countries and facilitates exchange on best practices, but also on lessons learned, because whereas a best practice, there have also been mistakes in the past, lessons learned, which is very important to transfer internationally. And so on the way of this movement, I like the idea of the movement that Simone mentioned, the implementing a reform as a movement over a longer period of time. So over the course of this movement, there will be many moving parts, many different things that you have to face in the right way and prioritize, launch different things at the right points in time, prepare them with the right ramp up time. And stakeholder engagement and so on. So I think the input from stakeholders, from peers in other countries that have already done such a process hopefully can be useful, and certainly IEA is available to continue accompanying this process in Brazil, and looks forward to that, because we've also felt it's a two-way process where our peers and our secretariat colleagues can learn a lot from the exchanges. So with that, I'd like to thank very much to the UK Prosperity Fund for supporting all of this work for all of this period. And also thanks a lot to all the experts that we've seen today. Again, once more in action. It was a group, subgroup of all the experts that have been involved over this more than 2 years now. So without them, this wouldn't be possible. They are taking time out of their very busy schedules as practitioners of these kinds of reforms and give their advice. So thank you very much to everyone who has been participating and chipping in with their time to this. Thanks a lot to colleagues we've seen today, JB, Jean-Baptiste Dubreuil, and Gergely for their expert input. And also to Mariano, who was today our Master of Ceremony, but frankly has been the Master of Ceremony of the project for the last more than 2 years. So thanks also to him for implementing and coordinating the project. Thanks to Brazil, obviously, and here our colleagues in MME, Simona Araújo and Aldo Junior, who I can greet now here on the screen. Nice to see you, Aldo. I'd like to also thank Elio Visaggio at ANP and Eloisa Borges at EPE for all their hard work and all the great cooperation in this project. With that, I close from our side and hand the floor to Aldo Junior.
Muito obrigado. Prometo ser breve, a gente está um pouco atrasado aqui no nosso cronograma, mas eu não posso deixar de agradecer. O Novo Mercado de Gás é um programa que conta com a participação de diversas instituições do governo brasileiro, né? Não só o Ministério de Minas e Energia, mas a Casa Civil, o Ministério da Economia, a ANP, a EPE, o CAD, o BNDES. E em nome dessas instituições e do secretário de Petróleo e Gás, José Mauro, que infelizmente não pôde estar conosco aqui por conta de um problema de agenda, eu gostaria de agradecer imensamente à Agência Internacional de Energia por esse evento, na pessoa do David, do Mariano, na sua pessoa, Liane, pela colaboração com o governo brasileiro nesse processo de reforma desde 2018. Não posso deixar de agradecer também o governo do Reino Unido por viabilizar essa colaboração por meio do Prosperity Fund. Agradeço também a todos os especialistas que participaram dessa discussão, nosso já quase brasileiro, o Marcos, a Maria, Gergely, Paulo, Patrick, Carla, Ana Maria e todos os outros, o Vim também, todos os outros que de alguma forma participaram dessa discussão ao longo desse processo, são grandes especialistas, e também do lado brasileiro, a todos aqueles que têm contribuído com esse processo de abertura. E a todos os mais de 160, chegamos a ter mais de 160 participantes no evento, então obrigado a todos que atenderam. Espero que esse evento tenha sido esclarecedor, que tenha trazido novas informações e perspectivas para todos. Em breve a gente deve divulgar um trabalho, um white paper, produzido pela IAA, contendo esses temas que foram discutidos aqui nesse evento, e para ter acesso, só nos acompanhar nas redes sociais. A gente deve divulgar isso nas redes sociais e no site do Ministério em breve. Então, acho que é isso. Queria desejar a todos um bom dia, um abraço, e passo de volta a palavra para o Mariano para encerramento do evento.
Thank you very much, Aldo. Thank you very much, Jörg. And with that, we have finished our webinar for today. I would like to thank again everyone who took part in this, including the audience, for sending great questions as well. We have gone 20 minutes longer than expected, but hopefully it's for the right reasons. It's because the conversation was interesting and useful. Thank you very much.
And many thanks to our translators who have been interpreting all the while. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much for everything.
Very interesting.
Bye-bye.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.